So what we're doing today is going through the features that you would have seen us discussing in the invite that we sent through to you. The intent is to give you some pointers as to existing features that you may be using and some of them that may be in the current versions that you might need to get to. Okay, on to it. So these are the areas that I'll be touching on today when I go through it. So the global search feature, which has been in Sage for a while. We'll look at some Excel outs and ins inside Sage and also the internal reporter for Sage Intelligence. Discuss some of the standard payment functionality in Sage, which we find underused in some areas. We'll also look at automation options that are available, and a good number of our clients use these, but if you don't, maybe some of these will float your boat. Which allow with workflow and getting your payment authorities lined up with what your management teams want. We'll also discuss the generic drills within Sage. So basically allowing us to see back into the system from the GL just to make those clear. Look at the new-ish Australian tax module, just where it is and what it roughly does. Discuss disaster recovery, a favourite topic. When disasters happen, that's when we really need it. So when the fish are in your server room, then that's when we know we needed to have thought about this earlier. And then I'll look at some new functionality, just to shout that out. Okay, so I'm looking at search. Here it is. When you choose a search, now notice it's search text. I can choose what I search in. So if I just want to search in vendors, we'll see if any vendors have the word William buried in them. No. Do any customers have any? No. And maybe any transactions. So if I go away from master data and look at transactions, then I'll pick up some. So you may see that you want to only search in, say, items. I think there's an item or two with the word bulb in it. And then you'll pick up those items only. So it's great that you can drill down into one area of the system and in fact in one type of transaction, because you may have a common inquiry which is thousands of times in your system, but you can just pick it out from where it might live. So for instance, in purchase orders, I rather suspect the word bulb might be presented somewhere. There it is, but maybe the word William would be in a purchase order, and there it is, only in purchase orders, or I can choose all transactions and see it in different places in the system. So that's great. You can make it bigger as usual, and you can drill. So you click on the hyperlink, and that then comes from this technology, which is a particular way of searching, and drops out into the normal Sage screens. So I find that quite useful, and in fact, once you start to get into it, things like just inquiring on your items, you may find it's faster or certainly more open to do a search on any text, not just the name or description. Like in Sage, the search is very prescriptive. Search on description. Now I want to search on sort of anything, and here we go. This is the anything search. And as I say, the admin can update that by force, or it will do it on a regular basis. So really that's the key to search. You can pick any text, and if it's in the system, up it pops. If not, it doesn't. So you might find that you're looking for things to search. You can go around the other way and find an item and see where it's been sold and so on. Okay, so that's enough about global search. A comment: if it's in your system but not functioning, it does use slightly different technology to Sage core search. So if it's not working, there may be ports that are blocked or so on. And so shout out to your consultant to assist if need be. The next thing I'd like to look at is an area which is fairly well used in Sage, which is your export import. So these are your customers and their master data. Okay, so if you wish to, you can always print the customer list, which is sort of handy, that little file print, and then from there export the report, but that's a bit limited. So I much prefer to export the raw data. When you do that, and I'll just put that somewhere I can find it again. So maybe C temp, and this will be all customers. So this is a standard export, which people tend to do a lot. And then there's my data. As you can see, it's not so deep. This particular data set's quite thin. It's sample data. And then go find your document and open it in Excel. From Excel, you would normally then start filtering. Okay, I'm only interested in inactive customers. So firstly, You've got to open Excel, and then you've got to go find an inactive date, and there it is, switch active, but just sort of, that's a bit obscure, and you have to find those with 0 and sort and so on in there. So that's the usual method, and of course you can import from there as well. What we can also do is, if you like, advanced filtering. So still coming to customer data, but instead of just putting a name in here and hitting go, which I could still do, I can go to set criteria. So if I go to set criteria, then essentially the criteria means the search function, and I can choose what it is I'm trying to differentiate my export on. So notice it's everything. So you could pick everyone who's not been active in the last year, that sort of selection, but I'm going to choose those with a status of something. The way this works is choose the column, press add, it adds it to your list of criteria, which is this grid, and then in the status criteria, double click, and then it will pop up the first rule. Normally you're only using one, and I want inactive. So I'm interested only in inactive exports. So then hit OK. Now I've got a script. I can save that for later and then load it. So if I've got multiple little queries, I can just hit load and choose my query, or I can recreate it. When I hit OK, I only see 2 records. So no surprises what's happening there. It's only picking those 2 that are not active. Okay, so that's an important feature for those who are doing a bit of advanced exporting. Trying to do the filtering outside of Excel means you might be able to choose elements that either make your life easy if you're doing it repeatedly, or just save some work inside Excel. Another point on import. So here's some customers that I'm about to import. There's my inactive customers that I just exported. So there's 2 lines. And we look at the screen here, you can see all of the fields that have been presented into Excel. And you might have edited them. You might have changed some of those so that they're no longer in the same font, format. Sorry, you might have uppercased the suburb or something like that. But what I'm trying to do today is something a bit different. These are just the inactive customers, you will recall. So I'm thinking, well, I've got some various information in here, and I just want to add a little bit to inactive. So I've got a number and a short name, and the short name is 12 characters. So I'm just for no particular reason, because I'm trying to find an example, I'm just going to put a word in the short name. So I'm changing the short name from the truncated customer name just to the word inactive. And the way I did it is right-clicked, chose value, and forced a value in. Now, this works for thousands of imports or just for 2 lines. Anything will now override with whatever I chose. So that's actually quite a handy shortcut, because sometimes the edit doesn't need to be done in Excel anymore. You can just do it straight on the screen. Press OK. Okay, it's updated too, thanks for that. And I just got to go find one of my inactive friends. There's inactive, and there you can see the short name did indeed get changed. Alrighty, so that's a couple of points for reflection on import and export. The next I want to call out is Sage Intelligence. So Sage Intelligence is the inbuilt intelligence reporter within Sage, which is in addition to the financial reporter, which does good financial reports within Excel. Sage Intelligence does general reporting across all modules, including Geo, and many use it. It's if you don't use it, you still worth a look, because it does have a number of standard reports that are already working out of the box. So here's some of those reports, and when you fire them up, they ask some questions and then generate the answer. What I want to call out today is that inside the Sage's box of tricks, which is an external utility called Sage Intelligence Report Utility. What this utility does, if I can just line it up correctly, is allows me to pull out the, it goes to the web, finds the current list of templates and presents them to you. So they may have been updated or indeed added to since you've gone through it. Whenever you've done that, then you can pick the report that you want. Maybe you're interested in top 5 vendors, monthly sales trend. Click download, and it will download those 2 reports from the web into your system. So basically updating it as if we'd installed Sage from a fresh version rather than whatever date we did your Sage. And it says these are now available. Okay, so I wanted to point out that this utility is available. It doesn't need to be installed by a consultant or anything in Clever. It's just a little utility. You can find it by going to the web search engine of your choice and typing in these words: Sage Intelligence Report Utility. That's how I find it. It's somewhere over in SageLand. You find it, you download it, you run it. Okay, that's the nice thing about it. And then it will add those new reports into Report Viewer. And for those who are already using it, they're very familiar with the Report Viewer and its functionality, but you don't have to be an existing user to, I might just close that, reopen it, to use it. You just, in you go. All Sage come with a single user, at least a single user viewer. If it says when you open this that you don't have the rights to view it, talk to your admin or go to License Manager and give yourself the right to use it. You can bounce that license around. Okay, and then within this list, whichever reports I chose are now there. So top 5 vendors, it looks like I've pulled that down again. And then maybe the Sales Master, was it Sales Master by month? Maybe it's either this one or that one. So it adds to the reports that you've done. Okay, another comment is when you generate these reports, do keep in mind that it puts the data that it selects onto a hidden sheet called Sheet 1 or data. And so you can unhide the sheet in Excel and then use it yourself. You don't have to use the inbuilt, pivot table or whatever it is it gives you in Excel. You can just go to the raw data. So you can use these as a data pump. Okay, so really my key point was that you can update these reports and they're always worth a look. All right, AP payments. So within AP, and apologies for those who already use these areas, but it's worth shouting out. You raise your documents such as invoices or the might have come from the purchasing system. We then pay them. So you can open a batch and start creating payments 1, 2, 3, 4. Or alternatively, you can use the create payment batch to create payment batches. And so there is a simplicity in some of the naming, which is great. This is my tool of choice. It allows you to select some of the rules that you can create up in the setups. In this case, I've got a rule called all vendors. It's pretty straightforward. What date would I like to pay them on? Today. What date would I like the batch to be on? And so on, all the banks and so on. And then importantly, criteria. So in criteria, what are we going to pay based on? Now, classically due date, we're paying, we don't want to over egg it, but you can choose discount date if you've got a discount function going. It's unusual to use. So I want to pay everything due at the end of last month. And I can choose other selections. Don't pay anything less than $10 because that's a waste of my transaction fee. And I'm feeling poor, don't pay anything over $1 million. So all those sort of rules, they're classic, and you can choose a number of other like payment codes. They're very handy. You may have a payment code this sample data doesn't, called EFT. So only pay those who are going to go through the EFT module. And you've just tagged that inside the vendor. That's a great one to do. Another interesting thing is don't pay vendor of choice. So if you're particular entity that you don't want to pay at the moment for whatever reason, you can exclude them and they won't go into the list. Then you click register. Register will create a pre-check register, which is just a report. It's quite a nice one, and it says these are the documents that I propose to pay if you do create this batch. So I find that report quite handy. Be aware it's only a template or a guess. You don't have to pay those. You don't have to run through those. So this is not the final batch list that has checks paid. This is a suggestion. Now, where is my report? There. Okay, so it's going to pay all of these documents. If I go to the end, it's $64,000 is going out the door, and for each of them, these are the documents that I'm paying. So $5 grand, 130 minus 60. So that's quite a handy report. Not a bad one to pass off to someone else to tick off. When you're comfortable with that, you might want to change your criteria. Then you click generate. When you click generate, it grabs the same rules and creates a batch, in this case, batch 28. Nice thing is that batch is editable, so you can go to that batch like a normal payment batch and edit it. So you can delete lines, add invoices, remove whatever. So you may well want to edit that batch endlessly before you then post that batch. So this is really the important point about that, is that it created all those payments, which is 28, batch 28, 15 vendors. It might have been 100 lines selected. I didn't have to use my fingers. Okay, so I might come back in again. Next, I want to make another thing which I skipped over. See this pay all selected or only forced? You can say only forced in the sense if you have an immediate payment run that you want to run today, because normally you run them on Friday, you promise someone you'd pay in the next run, and so you say that document is really important, I'll pay it the next run. And so you do a midweek run, but you only pay the specials. So that's how you do that, only forced. That looks at the individual invoices. So how do we do that? We force them over here under control payments. So you can pick up a vendor. I don't know if this guy's got any, but we'll see. Yeah, look at that. So I picked up the first vendor. I picked up some documents. Let's have a look at some monies. There you are, $5,000. I'm going to force that. And so what I do is I say, this is the document detail, force it. So now, oh, it's in a pending batch. Okay, one moment. That's because I'm already paying it. It's saying, well, hang on, you can't force it. It's already over here. So I'm going to delete my system generated batch, which I made. I'm allowed to do that. It's just a batch. So now I'll try again. And so process, thank you. So now this document is forced. Really what it means is that's an override on the due date. No matter what due date it has, it will be pushed into the next run. Runs only talk about this create payment batch. You'll still see that document status when you put it in manually, but if you're trying to automate, then the forced will work for you. You can also put it on hold. So exactly the same thing. Don't pay that one. We're in dispute. Quite a handy idea, and process that. The risk is that it's on hold. So when you run your payment runs, it will get ignored. It will show somewhere, but and in your lists and transactions, it will show on hold, but it will get ignored, and you have to come back and put it either to normal or forced to get it to run. So that's nice. Another note is that you can override the due date after you've posted the document. So this is the one spot you can do that in Sage. So once the document's posted in AP, you can still come and say, oh, it's due on some other date, which is great news. You can also force a range of documents. So classically, you might choose one vendor, all documents, and force them all or put them all on hold. So you can do that as well, rather than just putting the vendor on hold. All right, so in summary, control payments gives you document by document control. If you need it, you can use it to help you automate this create payment batch. And you do see the changes you made on things like your payables register. So if you're just listing out all your payables and you put one on hold or forced, you can see that. Okay, so quite handy. Not everyone uses this, most do. Only some people use that. The downside is if you do change the document status, say to on hold, you've got to take it off hold. So you've got to do two things. Okay, AP automation. So I wanted to briefly talk about and touch base on the workflow or purchasing functionality which is available in Sage module. So out of the box standard Sage, you're likely to already be facing purchase orders, which is quite a functional module which has got the core idea of transactions, so you can raise a requisition. Hey, I want something, and then maybe you or maybe someone else has authority to turn that requisition into a PO. So a very direct sort of button. Then once it's a PO, when we send that out, we receive it, and then we go through the accounting and back into invoicing. If we wish, we can impose or add another module, purchase workflow, which will allow us, instead of just doing a requisition and then vaguely someone who has authority can push it to a PO, the requisition can go and hunt the right authority itself with a workflow. So that's quite nice. So the workflow itself looks a bit similar, where we got a requisition, but it has, instead of a post button, it has a submit button. So we go off, and then it looks at a set of rules, and we can have multiple rules and quite sophisticated rules. So if it's over 10 grand, or if I'm in this department, or if I'm this person, it does different things for me or you. And classically, what it will do is, let's say you have to go to your department manager. That would be useful. So off she chugs, sends that manager an email, and then she doesn't click anything on the email because that's very insecure. But they log into Sage, authorize it, and then if it's over a certain amount, maybe you have another rule, go to their manager. So same thing, that manager gets an email, hey, there's some work to do on Sage, and they log on to the Sage environment and authorize it. When the final authorization is done, it's below that level, so it's okay. Then the original requisitioner gets that email, and then they also get sent the PO as part of that email attachment, so they could email that directly or come back to Sage and print it. That's the short and sticky of workflow. Nice thing is that it also works on internet browsers, so you can raise requisitions on a browser, but more commonly, a manager would be on a browser saying yes or no. They can still see the attachments on that document if you've attached a quote or the invoice or something. So you can still see that to approve it. You can reject it. You can make notes, the same as you would inside Sage. So the approval console is available on the web. It's also available on your phone. So there's actually a native app for both Apple and Android. And those apps allow us to authorize the process without having to go onto Sage. So the login is different to your login in Sage. Essentially, it remembers you on the phone, which is a very handy place to be. You can still view the attachments on the phone, much as you would any other, even if it's an Excel document, it might be a bit small. So we do see quite a few clients using those sort of functions to get authorizations done by a wide range of managers who are not logging into Sage, or they could. Okay, so we do see that that's quite useful. There's also a workflow functionality around the payables, which is the invoicing. So you might not be purchasing it, but still get an invoice and need to authorize that. So you can go directly into the purchasing, accounts payable, enter an invoice, and that goes through the same workflow concepts. It also allows for invoices coming through from purchase orders, and essentially we see that as a variance engine, mostly used that way. If the invoice comes through and it's different to the amount that I authorized $1,000, this is $1,100. Okay, go to someone and get their approval. Or you could authorize everything from fresh. Same concept, you can go to the web and your phone. So, and add attachments and so on. I do see that the workflow modules are very functional and they're widely used. And so I just wanted to make the comment that you have this idea of automation, which is something that's in addition to traditional screens. It's quite functional. It additionally has another part to it, or module if you like, which is called the document processing. So for invoices, you have the ability to send the invoices electronically as a PDF or however you got them off to an address. The address is attached to an AI engine. It reads the document, does its best shot at reading it, and then sends it back to a console for the users to compare the document to the original order, or and then you can make a call as to whether that, yes, that's the document that I wanted. So we can, instead of having to key invoices, it's very useful where you've got high volume invoicing coming in. Instead of having to key them, you can let the module do the grunt work, and you can tidy it up. And once it's pushed into the system, it's back into the normal flow. So let's say it's a standard invoice from a utility, so it had no PO. All right, so it's your water bill. It comes in, you just mail it off to someone who cares, or you train the water people to send it to there as well. Tell them that's your web address. And then you either get a notification or you go to the console and there's all your invoices waiting to confirm, and you pick those one at a time. You get to see what it thought it was and the original scanned document. So that's another feature that you can use. It's called Document Processing Service. These modules come from the third-party vendor Pacifictech, who are over in New Zealand. And we work with them a fair bit. So they're quite accessible and friendly and able to also modify and update things as needed. They can also write things like macros. So if your workflows are highly complex and heinous, you've got some nasty workflow, if from this vendor, but it's Tuesday, then do this. Yep, they can do that. I'll dob them in. Okay. All right, the next on my list is just talking about drills. So if we go to the general ledger, and I might start off in a batch, which is where you might land with some transactions. So for instance, here's an AR. I might start with an OE batch. So if I look at a batch which has come from a submodule, there's all the accounting, debits and credits, but this is the drill, which most will be familiar with. It changed from a Black & Decker drill that looked like a drill, which was highly intuitive. So now we've got an orange dot. So you click on the orange thing, and then it will go back to the source of this information. So if you look at the source code on the journal, that gives you the hint. I expect to drop onto an OE shipment screen, and there I am. So that makes sense because that's the screen that did this particular bit of accounting. And then the shipment, if it's got an associated order, you can drill there. So look for orange. Now, this doesn't show an order number, so this might be a shabby piece of data. So we may not get to the drill, but if I had an associated order, off I go. So the nice thing is, also I can drill to the invoice depending on the attached information in the shipment. So it's whatever drills are available on this next screen, you can then fire up. So I went from a GL journal to the shipment to the associated invoice, which can be quite useful because there may be information I want to find out about taxes or who were the associated salespeople and so on, which is not really general ledger data that you would normally have in here. Okay, so I find drills quite functional. That's a drill from the order side. Maybe I'd like to look at the PO side. So that's a deleted batch. If I come here, lots of deleted batches as opposed to batch. Okay, and again, look for orange. That I'm expecting to go to receipt because that's the source code. And so I'm now going back up into my purchasing side of the house. All right, so again, that's nice. By the way, when you do, if you're in investigation mode, don't ignore all the tiny friendly buttons down the bottom, like history. So history will pop up the PO history screen, but pre-populated for that vendor. So you can't get to the screen in other ways. So it's probably that there's not a lot going on in that time frame. Yeah, so I changed the time frame and I can see more. So the nice thing is that this is now a history of who this, what this vendor has been supplying to us because we're in an inventory purchase mode. Click on details and it will try to give you more information about that particular document associated with that items, because this is per item, per period, and then you can go and look at the associated documents in that period. So, okay, so none of that is particularly new. I just wanted to make the point that it's quite functional and, you know, maybe can be used more. Another note is that within Sage, each module, we can modify what the general ledger receives. So most would be familiar with that. So the general ledger is essentially an open book for writing. So I have a reference field, a description field. I do have optional fields, and I've also got a comment field. All of those can be manipulated so that when you do sub-ledger entries, AR, AP, PAOE, bank, you can determine, all right, I want the PO number and the receipt number and the invoice number and the vendor number, all in the reference field. And I want this description and that description in the description field. If it runs out of characters, it just chops it off. comments and underused field is quite nice, it's quite long. Optional fields, if you have those where you tag optional at transaction level, they can also be handed to the geo at transaction level. Just a small setup. Okay. All right, so I'm doing okay on timings, according to me. So Australian tax module. Within Sage, of course, there's always been a basic tax. Okay, so basic tax allows us to set up tax, manage within APAR, and then the reporting has always been reasonably straightforward. So just a tax tracking report. So a tax tracking report basically lists it out per period by type. So it's a 1, which is normally taxable, 2, often tax-free. So you have those set up, and then you get some summaries and take that figure and go put it onto the BAS, because there's a number. Quite a few clients also either as well as or ignore the tax tracking report and just go to the GL. GL is full of tax codes, the actual journal that's been made, and you can use that as a source of truth as well. Sage have, in the last few versions, given us a tax report module for Australia. And what that will do is generate a printed BAS. Okay, so the way it works is that we have, look, I might just jump to this version of it. It's a different company. So what allows us to do in the tax report module is set up some configurations and then look at the BAS that will be generated and put in all your exceptions. So for instance, there may be all sorts of payroll data that's not being captured in detail within Sage, and so you need to key that in. And the way it works is each area of the BAS is called out, and we, having picked the area, we nominate the GL codes associated with that. So often, you know, sales is pretty straightforward. You can also nominate parts of the tax tracking that are associated with this. So you might say that sales are associated with this tax authority, with this tax class, and with this item class. So even though they're a non-taxable person, you're selling them taxable merchandise, so that's still part of your overall sales. You know, that's a decision that you need to see, okay, what part of my GST goes into the BAS, and then you just save it. So that's all the way through. So you can see there's a little bit of setup there, and especially if there's many GL accounts, but you can also export, import those, so make a few examples and then pull them in bulk. Once the setup's been done, then we can run a BAS. The first thing we would do is come to this activity statement screen, refresh it, and it will force the period that I've chosen. I've chosen a wide period, but it might just be that it's one. Yeah, there's a bit of transactional data on the first period of 22. And so you can see that it's gone to the ledger accounts that I nominated and put the figure in there, and the tax accounts that I've nominated and picked those figures up. Obviously room for duplication here, so that's something that you can use, even this just as a discussion point. And then you can say, no, it's not 1.4 million, it's some other figure that I've worked out. So I can take or add amounts just using maths, and now the BAS will report this figure, 926. So it's highly configurable. You can just pick up any number and put it in, because that's sort of how the BAS often works, is you start with something solid and then you do some accounting on top of it. Obviously, you can run across all of your areas and doing that to everything. And then a summary will give you what it's going to look like. Add that and then print it. You can export an audit, which will show you the detail which is used to make up your BAS, which is obviously your working paper. Really, that's it. So it's a mildly straightforward tool. Some don't have it but don't want to use it because it's essentially recreating what they're already doing over here in a real BAS, and they don't need the screen to do it for them. They're happy to, you know, pull it out themselves from trial balances. But here's a tool to assist. It is it's a component of current Sage editions, but it does need to be activated. So if it's not in your system, ask your consultant and we can add that back in to you. Okay. The next point is disaster recovery. So I'll try to keep it to a slim discussion. No one here is unfamiliar with the idea of things go wrong in computer systems. We have it happen about every 6 months that a client lets us know that something disastrous has happened. They can be wide and varied, of course. So a classic might be a crypto locker style attack, which tends to be the current terror, and they will basically run through your system and destroy actively whatever they can find. So once they get through, your IT's clever firewalls and defenses, and it's quite easy for people to, in error, click on a innocent looking, here's your electricity account, and no, it's not. So then it's difficult to defend against, and once those sort of things are in your system, they're difficult to undo, and they're quite destructive. So, I'm talking to people that many of you will know a lot about this, but my key is that they can actually destroy all of your system, everything that's connected, all of your backups. Backups have to be connected at some point to backup. It's their Achilles heel. And so if they are connected at the time a crypto locker is digging around, they will classically actively hunt for those files and folders and then lock or destroy them. And the idea being that you then have to go with money to the purveyor of the malware and ask for them to unlock it, and they'll ask for money. The way to avoid that is, of course, to have backups that are air-gapped or offline. So that's classic. I'm not telling you anything new. The drama is that those backups are quite not difficult to maintain, but need thought, need setup, need testing. And not every time do they exist in a manner that you, as the accounting team or finance group, need. So we do see, and it's the reason we're pointing it out is we do see it on a unfortunately regular basis. It's eaten my backups. Something's eaten my backups. It could maybe not even be a crypto locker. There can be physical events. The floods we've recently experienced. We've had more than one client come to us. One of them came to us, the server room's underwater. Now, that's not going to happen to most of us, but the roof could leak, and essential equipment could be destroyed. But a server actually underwater tends to do it damage. In that case, they did over time recover one of the drives from that flooded server, even though it was underwater, which is a great thing. But it can happen. You don't have to know what will be the problem. My comment for the finance team is the finance system, it does not belong to the IT team. It belongs to you. It's your car. They're the mechanics. And because it's your car, you're responsible. So, you can crash it, drive bad data into it. Okay, that's an accident. But if the engine goes wrong and you're driving along and you don't get it serviced, that's your responsibility, and that rests on your shoulders. The way that finance, who are not IT gurus, can do that is to call out the IT team and make sure that we're backing up, and that we're backing up the correct stuff, which I'll mention in a minute, and that it's tested. So I start at the end. Testing is crucial. You cannot assume, even though you've got a very expensive IT team telling you all these good things are happening, you go, great, that's not good enough. You got to say, at some point, and maybe everyone's busy, but in a month, at some point, I want a test. And then they'll say, well, how do we do that? Well, so you tell me, you're IT. So you classically restore some data over here, and then tell me it worked. Okay, that's nearly good enough. Restore these files, and then I look at them. So yes. So it's important that tests are done. I mean, they might only be annual, but if you test it and it doesn't work, then that was the best thing that could happen, because now let's get it working. Also, testing should be, was that air gapped? Yeah, it's all there, it's beautiful, but if it's in the network and connected, it's very vulnerable to malware. So air gapped, was that something air gapped? No, but we have a copy of that every night that's over there on the cloud in Amazon, or on this drive, which is in my pocket. Okay, do we have a couple of those? So you ask the hard questions, you're not silly to ask them, and if you don't ask them and something goes wrong, you look very silly, because ultimately IT, it's their job to keep the darn thing running, but you need to take it in for service. Sage has more than one thing you need to back up. Another comment, data is obvious, so we keep our data in Microsoft SQL databases, and you need to keep that safe, which is a key and obvious point. More obscure is the fact that Sage has an installed environment, and in that installed environment, we save stuff which is unique to you. So we save some user setups and so on. They can be recreated. The environment itself, that can be recreated, but sometimes it's got some specialized, customized pieces that live in that, essentially a folder structure. So if we don't have those custom pieces, then they have to be recreated, and that can be quite time consuming and very stressful if you're waiting for your system to come back and someone's reinstalling a complex piece. And importantly, also reports are classically, they don't have to be, but classically stored inside that environment. So if customized forms like orders and purchase orders, but also you may have extensive suite of financial reports, Sage Intelligence. Sage Intelligence keeps its data inside that folder structure. So wherever Sage is, and I'm just looking at it now, I can't resist, you click About System Info, and it's these two folders here. They're the ones. So your finances, your folders. You know, if you're comfortable, this is all great. Don't worry. But when's the next test? If you're not comfortable, ask today. Hey, IT support or person, and sometimes it's you. Okay. Sometimes in smaller firms, the financial team are the IT team. Make sure you're comfortable. This folder is somewhere safe. Maybe not every night, but certainly every month. That folder needs to be well outside of your business so that we can restore to it. All righto, so I'll be quiet now. I'm sorry if I've rabbited on too much for those who are experts in IT. You know, you get a non-expert's view, but last statement, it belongs to the finance team. So please keep your eyes on it. Finance also does tend to have the authority to push around a little bit IT and say, hey, you know, you got to help me because next year you want to buy a new server. So I find the finance does have somewhere to go when it comes to it. You're not the weakest player in the room. Okay. Oh, and if you do have a disaster, certainly come to us. We can normally recover all sorts of pieces, but it's nicer if it's, you know, beautifully backed up. Okay, just a couple of key points about some minor new functionality. In the PO, those who do lots of PO entry, they now allow us to default dates and locations from the header of a PO, and so every line that pops up pushes those in. It didn't used to, it's just a little bug, or not bug, but a little lack of feature, which is now better. The financial reporter in the most recent Sage supports Excel 64-bit, which means that we're no longer constrained to using 32-bit or older version Excels on the finance team who are using the financial reporter in the general ledger. So that's the this tool here. It'll reach out to 64-bit Excel. The latest versions of Sage not only have some new features, there's a payment gateway as well, which don't have time to discuss today, but they also support the most recent versions of Windows server and workstation. So your IT may be wanting to move your servers up to something the most recent. If you've got the current version of Sage, you can do that. We also support Windows 11, which not many are currently using. It's still a little bit new, but if you are, you'd want to be on Sage 2022.